What are the best rogue Yu-Gi-Oh strategies for this format? Big dog, today we are going to be talking about some of the most powerful rogue strategies on a tier list that you can be using. So in case you guys didn't know who I am, hi, I'm TheCaliEffect. I'm going to be your professor today, and today we're going to be teaching rogueonomics. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with y'all, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. For today's video, we're going to be talking about the top rogue Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that you can be using to beat the meta decks. And of course, as normal, I have a criteria. In this particular tier list, I try to avoid strategies that I've talked about in my previous tier list. So if you're probably wondering, Kelly, where does my deck go? There is a strong possibility that I've talked about it if it's a budget deck on the budget tier list, or if it is dominating the meta on the meta tier list. In today's video, I really wanted to cover some of those niche and popular strategies that I missed on my last tier list. So if you guys think that there is another strategy that I should be talking about on the next tier list, go ahead and let me know down below in the comment section. Another really important thing to rogue Yu-Gi-Oh strategies is that we're going to be rating these decks on how powerful they are, but also how well can these strategies stand up against the top decks in most played cards. It's a reason why these decks are good rogue Yu-Gi-Oh decks. I am not saying that you can't be successful with any of these strategies, but in this tier list, it is my job as a teacher to give you guys a guide on what would be the easiest path of success when it comes to rogue Yu-Gi-Oh strategies. Let's go ahead and start off with our first strategy, which is Phantasm. Big dogs, I am probably one of the very few players on the Phantasm train. Everybody's talking about Primite Fiendsmith, Primite Blue Eyes. What about Primite Phantasm? Because this deck barely plays any monsters, both Dominus Purge and Dominus Impulse are really powerful with this deck. Keep in mind, this is a normal based Yu-Gi-Oh deck, so you can really go crazy with your Dominus cards and take advantage of the fact that you're summoning really powerful normal monsters. The Primite engine also allows you to be able to complement this by giving you another consistent engine of advantage, but Primite Jobream and Primite Scream are crazy good cards, negating summons and negating card effects. You pair that with the really strong spells and trap cards that Phantasm has, I think you have a strategy that is secretly a solid rogue Yu-Gi-Oh choice. Next, big dogs, we're gonna move up to Ice Barriers, which did get a regional top just recently. First of all, I would like to say congratulations to that Ice Barrier player that did get a top. But I think that it's very unlikely for Ice Barrier to have continued success throughout the format. Let's face it, Ice Barrier doesn't do anything great right now. Mermail's got it washed down, Shark's got it washed down, heck, Phantasm got it washed down. When Maze of the Masters comes out, Marine Cess might have it washed down too, no pun intended. Even though Ice Barrier just did get support, I think it's one of the worst water decks you can play. Yes, Lancia Dragon Ancestral is crazy strong, and also being able to summon General Ryo, but the crazy thing about that is that you can play those cards in other water decks and not have to play the bricks that comes with Ice Barriers. In my humble opinion, the biggest problem with water is that these decks need to do something different that the other strategies can't, and right now Ice Barrier doesn't do that. Let's move on to Blue Eyes White Dragon. Now, when we talked about the budget version of Blue Eyes, we talked about the pure version because Primite cards are expensive. With Lordly Load being $70 a copy and Primite Dragon Aether Barrel being about $30 a copy, Blue Eyes was still really strong, but we couldn't talk about those cards when it came to that particular tier list. I think Blue Eyes right now is a complete Cinderella story, a strategy that was completely irrelevant, but because of a few cards inside of a $30 structure deck, this is easily one of the best rogue Yu-Gi-Oh strategies in the game. Kyber right now is jumping for joy. He got his briefcase ready with the 3 new Blue Eyes cards. I think Blue Eyes' success is here to stay. It's one of the best decks in the game, and it's almost disrespectful to call it a rogue deck, but the next YCS will probably handle that for us. Now, I've talked about Sharks so many times, I actually want to talk about Sharks in their potential. Not only have Sharks showed new continued support that we're getting later on in the future, we're getting a spell card called 7th Tachyon, which fixes all of Sharks' problems. It allows us to be able to use a spell card to be able to search our important cards from our deck to our hand, and since it's a spell card, it allows us to use Surfacing Big Jaws. Me personally, big dog, I'm telling you to pick up your Surfacing Big Jaws before they skyrocket in price, because Sharks might be the second best water deck in the game. A more Exceed based approach may be beneficial for Shark players in general, especially since Sharks are the best deck to take advantage of Abyss Dweller and Stealth Kraken, as well as Bahamut Shark and Totally Awesome. Really solid Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Somebody mentioned Monadium on my budget tier list and how we should talk about it. I think that Monadium is actually a lot stronger than what people give credit. If you like to play with balls, this deck is for you. Hey, yo! Some of the best pilots of Monadium, the Island Boys, Meek Mill, P. Diddy, they know how to take this deck to the max. Unfortunately for most other players, unless you're in that realm of strength, then you're probably going to be in the needs help category. Monadium has incredibly good board breaking capabilities, and it's pretty strong against hand traps. But where Monadium struggles is going against some of the more modernized Yu-Gi-Oh strategies and the fact that Baron and Borreload Savage Dragon are banned. Specifically, Monadium needs synchro support that would make them have stronger going firstborns. But if they probably were to have that, it's a possibility that this may be one of the best decks in the game and you'd be forced to play with balls. I don't know how you would feel about that. Evil Eye Fiendsmith is still a thing, big dog. Since Evil Eye is a rank 3 centric deck, you can summon Surzeal to your side of the field and then go into the Djinn Light Fiend, which is full Fiendsmith combo. Yeah, you guys know I have a soft spot with Fiends, but I'm gonna call a duck, and this is coping. I think once Evil Eye gets going, it's really nice. It's a very fun deck to play, but notice the euphemisms I'm using. Nice, fun deck. Keep it there. Unfortunately, I don't think it's doing anything anytime soon. I still think that Unchained is one of the best decks in the game, and Fire King actually proved that for me. Hear me out, big dogs. There's a lot of similarities between Unchained and Fire King. Both of these decks are pretty good in a destructive base format, which is one we're currently in. And when played correctly, both of these strategies can feel unstoppable. I think when Fable Lari finally gets banned, Unchained will be the best Fiendsmith deck hands down. But until then, it's going to have to revolve around punishing players from activating monster effects on your turn and breaking boards through its powerful Unchained cards. This is one of those strategies that requires a huge brain to be able to play, but is incredibly rewarding. The only drawback is the Molcharmy cards. Now, Branded is still going to stay as one of the best rogue Yu-Gi-Oh strategies in the entire game. I don't think that there's much of a debate here. Branded is not only one of the stronger budget Yu-Gi-Oh decks, it still finds ways to be able to win games with a well-trained player. To be honest, that's what Rogue is all about. If you put enough skill into the deck, are you rewarded for it? And Branded gives you tons of rewards. Just because you can't turn your brain off and activate Branded Fusion or summon Gimmick Puppet Nightmare to your opponent's side of the field doesn't make this deck bad. It actually just makes it more skilled. I would say that Solomon Great is also a really skilled deck. The only problem with Solomon Great is that it has the weaknesses of both Unchained and also the weaknesses of Solomon Great. My brother, have you heard of the best Solomon Great inboard? A Nibiru token. In all seriousness, good Solomon Great players have moves past that, but I think when you combine Nibiru plus the Charmies and also not necessarily great at destruction-like formats, I think that it's a pilot-dependent Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Solomon Great can still be successful with the correct pilot and the right circumstances. Now, Mitsurugi outside of Mitsurugi Raizio decks have seemed to have fallen off the map. I think that Mitsurugi has genuine potential. It's already proven pretty strong as a Raizio deck, and just recently we saw an Odonic Mitsurugi deck top. We know that the strategy is getting more support, and right now it does have the tools to be able to go against some of the better decks in the game. I genuinely think that Mitsurugi is a solid choice. Hands down though, this is the best TCG exclusive support we've received since Warrock's, big dog, and I'm telling you, there was a time where Warrock was dominating the meta in our heads. Now, there is some steam picking up about Sword Soul. The format is starting to go in a way where Sword Soul can really thrive. Archnemesis Protos is this deck's ace card, and it can search it and protect it from effect negations. Sheesh. In a tier 0 type format where it's reliant on one particular attribute, Sword Soul is a threat. Right now, I would have to say pilot dependent though. If I'm going to keep it a whole bean because of needing multiple cards to be able to combo, Sword Soul isn't seen as a threat. I mean, if you face it, when you look at it against other decks have 1-card combos. Sword Soul has 2 to 3. You gotta get with the times, old man. That's one of the biggest disconnects for Sword Soul, but the plus thing about it is that players are starting to figure out that board breakers are actually insane, and they're really good with Sword Soul. Now, something that's really good against Sprite is that it makes hand traps look silly. The bad thing about Sprite is that I don't think that it has the oomph to be able to compete right now. Going first, Sprite can set up some pretty menacing boards, but anytime it goes against a well-established Yu-Gi-Oh board, it can struggle in this modern format, especially since we're more destruction-based than we are negation-based. Overall though, Sprite does pretty well against the other decks in the game. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just willing to call a duck a duck. I have stood 10 toes. Actually, I stood 11 toes like I had a mutated 11th toe on Chimera. But another round of regional goes by, another disappointing week for Chimera. I think this is a bold take because it is stronger than its placement, but it obviously needs help. Chimera literally has all of the tools to succeed, and it still falls flat. I think it is a good thing to be harder on the strategies that you really like, because it allows you to be able to accept and grow as a player. Chimera has more cards going for it than every single Yu-Gi-Oh strategy on this tier list. It should be here, but it's just like watching my youngest son play soccer. It's right there. Sorry, buddy, Papa believe in you, but you a football player, dog. Not that one. Contrary to popular belief, I think Cyber Dragon is a lot stronger, and you guys wanted me to talk about Cyber Dragon on this video from last. I think the best way to play Cyber Dragon may be a horse version. We even actually built a wacky version of Cyber Dragon on Master Duel that used duality to be able to summon monsters like Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Or was that branded? That might have been branded. Regardless though, Cyber Dragon is a needs help type Yu-Gi-Oh strategy. Clockwork Knight is an underrated Yu-Gi-Oh card that I think people should be picking up. It's not necessarily enough to put Cyber Dragon over the top, but the new support does help. Centurion has been pretty disappointing, not as disappointing as Chimera. I think one of the better things for Centurion right now is that we're going more towards board breakers in the deck, which allows this deck to be able to thrive. I'm gonna put it in pilot dependent. It's straight up a good Yu-Gi-Oh strategy, but it absolutely sucks when you normal summon Centurion Primera and it gets negated and you don't have any follow-up. One of the biggest absolute problems with plants is that this deck almost feels like it rolls over when your opponent activates a Charmy. Contrary to some of these other strategies that can play around or behind, I don't see a line where plants just get Mole Charmied and they're like, oh, well, I can end on this board and it can kind of hold me off the next turn. That's where the deck needs help. Most other combo Yu-Gi-Oh decks have adapted to the Charmies. They have some sort of middle ground or ability to be able to play around that particular card. And while we're not always going to get hit with the Charmy cards, even when we're not, plants can struggle in certain situations. Next is Dragons, my boy. Dragons going heavy with those Bestials, my boy, and that's crazy. Yeah, I think, again, it's a good thing to be harsh against some of your favorite decks. It's in a needs help. I've been testing Dragons extensively, and one of Dragon's biggest problems is setting itself up for a board that actually lasts for a duration of time. In modern Yu-Gi-Oh, Seal's Pass is not always a wave. I do have a really cool Dragon deck that I think can keep up a little bit, and I might put the deck profile up on my alternative channel, Cali Clips. It's been doing decently successful, but what the deck really needs is Chaos Space to 3. That pretty much fixes a lot because it gives the deck a little bit more consistency, but also gives the deck draws that could help when getting hand trapped or Mole Charmied or something like that. Cat's out of the bag, big dogs, for Goblin Biker. This deck is also in the needs help. Goblin Biker isn't bad, but I think one of the biggest things that Goblin Biker actually sorely lacks is, hear me out, another boss monster and a card to help with the combo just a little bit. Snake Eyes has completely disappeared off the face of the map. Complete Copium. And Yubel is secretly one of the strategies that I think is incredibly good, can challenge. Ever since the limitation of Phantom Yubel, this deck has completely flown off the radar. But nothing has changed for this deck. It's still one of the most dangerous strategies in the game that can still put pressure on those hand traps if the opponent is playing it. It's also one of the natural themed Yu-Gi-Oh strategies in the game, so it plays the Fiendsmith cards a little different, dare I say even stronger than most other Yu-Gi-Oh decks. A lot of players are talking about the Buster Blader version of Blue Eyes. Dragon Whelp is a searchable card. That's crazy. I actually think that there's some legs to the Buster Blader version. Not only does it provide a median between the Primate version and the 3 structure decks, it's also pretty successful at locking out your opponent's important card effects. I'm gonna put Buster Blader in a solid choice, and that's a bold take for this video. Ironically, because of Kaiba, Yugi's other deck now has the tools to be really powerful. And it's also really good against going against Bestials and the Blue Eyes matchup. Hold on, buddy. This deck might cook. Now, it really pains me to say this, and maybe it's because I'm being a little too harsh, but Vanquish Soulless Copium. Every other Yu-Gi-Oh strategy has 12 ways to their 1-card combo. We got like, I don't know, 4.5 maybe? I really want to put Vanquish Soul in needs help, and to be honest with you, it really is a strategy that just needs help. The only thing that this deck needs is just more ways into Razin. That's literally it. White Forest is hands down one of the best decks in the game, guys. This deck's crazy strong. One of the coolest things I've been noticing about White Forest players is that they've been using Fiendsmith, they've been using Toybox, they've been experimenting with all different types of engines. But in a format where board breaker cards reign supreme, using a strategy that can take advantage of those board breakers by discarding them when you're going first or when they're useless is incredible. I love it. White Forest is one of the stronger strategies. You guys wanted me to talk about Mimighoul. The biggest problem with Mimighoul is that the Dominus cards are back. Yeah, also once your opponent figures out your gimmick, you're kind of cooked. I'm gonna put it in Copium. Hey, not every TCG exclusive can be as powerful as War Rocks, my boy. Just be happy that we have Mitsurugi as a really powerful strategy and then go from there. The Bestial monsters are starting to die down just a little bit, and I think Voiceless Voice is going to be one of the main benefactors of that. If Voiceless Voice Graveyard doesn't get interrupted, this deck is scary strong. I think people just flat out forget how good this strategy is against hand traps, the Charmies, and that it can play the adequate amount of board breakers to continue to keep playing. And lastly is Orcus. Orcus has been on a sneaky rise, my boy. I think what's really been helping Orcus is the Azamina engine to help insulate their combos. But we also got to mention that Bestials are on a slight decline. With decks like Mermail and Fire King occupying top slots in the game, players are a lot more hesitant, which makes this deck a little bit stronger. I'm going to put it in pilot dependent. Orcus does get more support in the very near future, which is going to make the strategy really good. So this just might be one of those hidden powerful Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that can come out of nowhere and take over the game. And that's all that I have for the Rogue tier list big dog. My students, I hope you guys have learned a thing or two in Rogueonomics. Of course, if you have any questions, stay in your seat, raise your hand, and post down below in the comment section. If you don't, go ahead and go to the next class, which is one of these videos, so I could catch you on the next one.